Hi, I'm Frank Coel. I'm excited to share this clip with you from a content marketing bootcamp that I ran recently. It's on content strategy. Now, content strategy doesn't have to be as big and cumbersome as it may sound. In reality, it's a one-page document that's made up of the specifics of the buyer's journey. I'm going to walk you through this process in this video, so check it out and let me know what you think. Let's talk about content strategy. You might be saying, oh wow, Frank, a content marketing bootcamp and we're finally talking about content strategy. So hopefully you guys can see though the value in going through these exercises, because if you just do what we're about to do next and you just jump into it, you're not going to be well informed. You're not going to create a strategy that's absolutely aligned with your buyer persona. I want to talk about the buyer's journey. You've heard me mention this a couple of times today. Definitely it's a big conversation at HubSpot and they talk a lot about this. But the buyer's journey is the active research process a potential buyer goes through leading up to a purchase. Generally speaking, we put that in three major buckets: awareness, consideration, and decision. Three major buckets. Now, you could slice that up a little bit more if you wanted to, but generally speaking, these are the three buckets. It's important to note that people don't go through this in a perfect linear fashion. They don't go here on day one, a week later, and then a couple weeks later. Sometimes they go here, a week later they go here, and sometimes they go backwards. So it can be very fluid, but if we were to just look at it in a linear fashion to understand the different phases that they go through, this is how we articulate that. So what is the awareness phase? The awareness phase is all about going from being completely unaware of their issue to being fully aware of what their issue is, right? So I don't even know I have an issue, all the way through to I think I have an issue and I know exactly what my issue is. Does that make sense? It's about understanding their issue and their situation, from being unaware to knowing exactly what that is and everything in between. Well, once they know their issue, then they go from completely unaware of the paths that they can take to being fully aware of exactly which path they're going to take. Finally, in decision, they've chosen their path, and they go from completely unaware of the organizations that can take them down that path to fully aware of exactly which organization that's going to take them down that path. Okay? So let's talk about a real example. Marketing, right? Let's talk about marketing. So unaware that I really even have an issue with generating leads and generating growth through marketing. Kind of just doing my thing. Let's say I'm a director of marketing somewhere. I'm just kind of doing my job, and I think everything's fine because I'm producing brochures, and I'm putting up the website. That's on track, and I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing as a marketer. But then all of a sudden, the CEO comes to me and says, what's going on? Why aren't we doing more in marketing? We should be generating leads. We should be generating real results. And so now I'm on my heels, right? I'm like, whoa, like I've now got this issue where I'm being asked to perform and meet certain metrics, right? So now becoming aware, I need to do something about improving marketing and making it more measurable and holding it accountable. So then what happens? Then I start going, okay, well, maybe I should read HubSpot's blog, and maybe I should look at Mashable and some of these other things. And I start looking around and saying, well, what should we do? Well, this SEO, we probably could do some SEO, and maybe we'll do some PPC, we might do that. And, oh, maybe there's this thing called content marketing, maybe we should do that too. So this phase is all about understanding the potential options and paths to solve that problem. So through this journey, that person might say, you know what, content marketing. That's what we're going to do because that is one of the most measurable things we can do to drive leads and at the same time create differentiation and awareness in the marketplace. That's what we're going to do. Now they go like, okay, who can help me with that? Right? So then they start going like, okay, well, who's a content marketing agency in California, right? They'll start looking and then they'll start asking their peers. And so they say, oh, I heard of this company called Elevator. No pitch, I promise. And I heard of this other company. And so then they start engaging organizations to find out, hey, I'm pretty sure I want to do this content marketing thing. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what you do. I need to generate more leads. And then eventually they nail it down to who they're going to go with. So does that journey make sense? And so what you guys need to understand for your buyer persona, what does that journey look like for them? As they go through each of those phases of being unaware of the issue, unaware of the paths, and unaware who can take them down the path that they want to go down. What does that look like for them? That's called the buyer's journey. And so you guys are going to define that next for your buyer persona. And now's the chance for you to really get in the mind of that person and what they go through and what they deal with at each of those stages. So you guys have a template that looks like this. Put in the buyer persona name, where it's Prudent Pete or Prudent Paul or whatever, whoever it is, Bob the Builder. Love these names. And I want you to just fill out the first box at the top, which is the situation. I want you to describe the situation for this person at the top. I've also filled in an example here so you guys can, have a little bit of a kickstart. So, for example, let's say this is for somebody who's a president, and in the awareness stage, they're frustrated due to the lack of budget to hire an HR director, but the size of staff is too much for an admin to take on. They're kind of stuck. They're growing. HR's like becoming too much to handle. They don't know what to do, right? They're frustrated. Then they go to the consideration phase, and they start asking entrepreneur friends about how they're solving this. They investigate options on the internet, and they discover a few options, a few paths. Finally, they narrow the path to one. They start making lists of vendors that can fill that path. They start engaging vendors for plans and prices. This, by the way, is for a PEO. So a PEO is a professional employment organization. So if you're about 10 to 50 employees, give or take, right? So 10 to 50 employees, give or take. You can use a PEO where all your employees are employed by your organization and the PEO. And as a result, your employees get access to big company benefits and HR management and HR services and support, okay? Pretty good deal for a certain size organization. Works really well for that. Outside that, it starts to shift. And so that's this person. That's where this person's at. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And this is the journey they go through. So I want you guys to first just, let's work on the first column. Let's not go this way. Let's work on the first column. And in your awareness column, talk about their situation. What is their situation? And then once you do that, what are their hot buttons? Well, if I were talking to this president, overwhelmed, too much to do, supporting staff with limited resources. Those are the things that are really hot topics for this individual. If this person were to search on the internet, at this stage, they might be searching how to manage PTO schedules, typical benefits for small companies, tips for managing a growing team. They're just trying to get a handle on their situation. Does that make sense? And so those questions are a good spot for the keywords. What are the questions at each of the stages? What, if they were searching or they were asking, what would they be asking? What would they be looking for? And then when you go down a layer, well, what kind of content can support that? Well, in this example, blog posts on how to manage growing teams, how to improve benefits and perks. How do you compare to other employers? This is the type of content that would resonate. And lastly, engagement. These are the options you have to engage them at this stage. Now, at this stage, it's probably too early to start thinking they're going to engage you in a phone call, or they're going to start engaging you in an analysis or a quote. It's just too early, right? So what kind of engagement can you offer to this individual at this stage? So in this example, maybe you can offer them a spreadsheet for managing employee logistics, or some sort of online analysis that they can do self-service to see how they stack up against competitors, right? So what kind of engagement can you offer them at this level that's low-level commitment? You don't have to talk to you, but you can start engaging them and providing value. Well, when they are now fully aware of their situation, they fully understand their issue at hand, and they move into consideration and start thinking about the different paths available to them to solve that situation, what does that look like for your buyer persona? What's the equivalent of that for your buyer persona? They move into consideration. Now there are a number of different paths to solve that problem, to address that issue. What does that look like? How would you describe that situation? In our example here, they now start asking entrepreneur friends. They start looking on the internet. Some of their hot buttons are options for company size, the industry, what do others do? Investment now becomes in the mix. That's a question. Some of the keywords or questions: small business HR solutions, outsourced HR. What is a PEO? Are PEOs a good deal? Right? Because now they're just now hearing about PEO as one of the options. I've never heard of that. What is that? Right? So then that comes up in their mind. What is that? Is that a good deal? Who's that for? Again, these are the questions that get asked at this stage. And then what kind of content would then address this situation? So blog posts about specifically educate on various outsourced HR options, all of the ins and outs of PEOs. And a great engagement piece at this stage might be an outsourced HR comparison guide. How about an online analysis? Is a PEO right for you? And then think about that last stage. This last stage is the decision stage, which is to say they know the path they want to go down. Now they're just trying to find a few organizations that can take them down that path. Now they're really looking at your firm, your organization. They're really looking at you and several others. So what does that situation look like? Well, they've narrowed the path down to one path. They start making a list of vendors that can fulfill that path, and they start engaging vendors for plans and prices and strategies and so on, right? So now the hot button issues change. Now it's about, okay, investment, credibility. What are the benefits to employees? What's the ease of implementation? And again, if they were searching, they might say, well, what are the best PEOs for small businesses? Or they might say, company XYZ PEO reviews. They might actually literally be saying, looking up, do you have reviews on your company? The kind of content that would support this person, case studies on client success, maybe by vertical, maybe a web page on your website on the process of implementation, right? The content that supports the individual doesn't always have to be a blog post or a downloadable thing, right? It can be one of the pages on your website that addresses the need, addresses the question. So if you know they're going to be asking about the implementation process, maybe that's a page that proactively talks about that. So that way, as they do their self-service and make up their own mind before they talk to you, you can at least inform them about that. And then finally, opportunities for engagement could be an online calculator to help factor cost, to Dan's point earlier. Maybe you can have a quick quote. Maybe they fill out a few pieces of information and someone will get back to them in 24 hours with a quick quote. Right? That might be a great way to engage them. Or even simply at this stage, it might be request a consultation appointment. That might be appropriate at this stage, depending on how your buyer buys. Thanks for watching. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below. And also in the description, we have a link to some free resources based on this Content Marketing Bootcamp that we ran. So if you want to learn more and get access to those assets that we delivered in the Content Marketing Bootcamp, go to the link below, fill out the form, and we'll send it off to you. Thanks again.